Hello everyone and welcome to another brand new episode of INclusiverse. I'm one of your hosts, Kally, Kaleda, and I am joined by the wonderful Nick Hamilton. And today's episode is all about race and ethnicity. We have a very special guest named Jazz. Hi Jazz, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We are very, very grateful to have you here today. Nick and I have deliberately been kept in the dark by our production team because we've been told that you have an incredibly powerful story to tell us, and they didn't want to ruin it for us. So can you tell us, before we get into it, a little bit about you?
Of course, yeah. As you said, my name is Jazz. My full name is Jaskaval, Singh, Aujla. Just thought I'd get that out there as well for the credits, of course. Mm-hmm. You know what? I was born and bred here in England, in Peterborough, in Cambridgeshire. I have been working out at Blue Square for 6 months, but prior to that, I've been here for a couple of years. A lot of my career has been in retail and marketing and sales, and I'm very, very looking forward to talking to you today about kind of my story.
So, Jazz, I mean, your story, I heard, is absolutely incredible. So I'd love to get going with that. If you could just tell us where it all began and where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's more of a compelling kind of story is more so the lessons and the mindset that I've adapted after kind of going through the pain, the struggle, the challenges of life, I suppose, in general. And I suppose on topic with race and ethnicity, like this podcast is, I'll talk to you about some of the kind of experiences I've had. There's been many people that have had worse, different, and similar. But of course, this is my story, and by no way do I kind of sit here begging for some sympathy or whatever, but I just wanted to get this message out there for anyone of your viewers or listeners to kind of want to listen. And ultimately, I think I should start from kind of when we were kids. I grew up real innocent, man, I can't lie. I didn't really understand ethnicities, race, colours. I didn't really see that. People are like, I don't see colours, I don't see this. I was very similar. I just had no idea. So as a kid, I kind of grew up innocent, thinking we're all the same. No one would treat me differently based on the way I look. Of course they wouldn't, and that makes sense to me. I was a Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon kind of fan, right? So I couldn't be touched. But as you get older on in life, you kind of become aware to more things, and as you grow up in the era, as an individual yourself, you change as well. I mean, when we first, my parents, my mum's from India, and my dad's from Kenya, Mombasa to be exact, and they were first generation immigrants, and they kind of landed here in the kind of late 60s, early 70s, and the environment was challenging in the UK between the 70s and the 80s, and now whilst things have gone, without using the word better, they're different. Back then it was a very kind of tough place to be, especially being an ethnic minority, right, and coming from the background and the beliefs that you've got. So that kind of raised us, and they moved over to Peterborough, a bit more quiet area, but you know what, the challenges still resumed. So I remember when I was 3 years old, but one of the first houses that we lived in, we used to have bricks thrown over into the garden from the neighbours. A couple of them missing us narrowly, right, and we have people that attack the house, smashing windows, petrol bombs, that kind of thing. And that happened all the way up into our teenage life, from graffiti on the side of the walls, people slashing tyres, people targeting your house and kind of name-calling, all the rest of it as well. And that kind of goes on into school. And it's weird because when I sit here reflecting on it, I think, gosh, you know what, that's not cool. But at the time when you're going through it, and I'm sure many of your viewers, your listeners, and yourselves can understand what I'm saying, you're just kind of told to accept it. It's one of those things where it's going to happen, just buck up and get on with it, right? Because you kind of report it to someone of authority. And it's kind of like, you know what, bottom line is we can't do anything about it, but here's what we can do, some steps, every so often. I mean, my head teacher was like, I tell you what, whenever I see you, I'll give you a nod, and if you give me a nod, I know you're okay. And I think, back then I was like, yeah, cool, the guy's on my side, we're all good to go. But now when I think about it, I thought, a nod in the head, it's just not going to cut it, right? And you go home and speak to your parents about it, and I'll talk about those in a second as well, but it's a similar kind of thing, son, you're in England, it is what it is, you got to be a strong man, you got to push on, you got to get on with it, right? And having a tough set of parents like that really kind of helps you instill that kind of mentality. I would prefer that mentality rather than anything else, but that's kind of a gist of the beginning of the story anyway.
You kind of like brushed over that so calmly, and there are so many things that I've just pointed out like in my head and been like, that's categorically, 1, not okay, 2, not safe. And how did you manage to deal with the constant like threat? You said the name calling, you've had bricks thrown in your garden, you've experienced breakages in your home and things that you care about. How do you manage to create like a coping mechanism for that?
Well, that's a good question. Do you know what the truth is? You don't. I think you kind of really don't have a coping mechanism. I suppose the mechanism is really just staying strong and being resilient and knowing who you are. I think also my parents took a lot of time to kind of educate me on where I was from. the roots, our background, why we are the way we are, and why we believe in what we believe in. And I suppose when you grow up with that kind of information, knowledge, you become quite proud of who you are. And that in turn builds resilience. It's a massive message amongst the Sikh community and the religion itself as well, as being strong and being tough and not just pushing on with life, but moving on in a force that keeps in high spirits. That translates to Nicolas, and some of your viewers and listeners may understand that term, but that is to absolutely keep on moving on in high spirits. Not so much always being positive or optimistic, but remaining positive and pushing on in high spirits even through turmoil and terrible times.
Even when people mistreat you?
Even when people mistreat you, yeah. I mean, like, it's not acceptable by no one's standards, and I don't want to spread the message of, oh, don't worry, just put up with it, one day it will stop. That's certainly not the message. In fact, my dad's advice was hit the biggest and the loudest first, which by no means necessary am I condoning any level of violence. And whilst that got me through those ages in that era, in today's world, things are very different. You know, everything from what you can report, how you can report it, the education that's available and the information that's available about not only race, backgrounds and all the rest of it, but also about who people are and how to treat them. Everything's changed so much.
Do you think people had any kind of understanding of your religion? So during that period of time, do you think the hate towards your family, which obviously is disgusting, was based on the way you look, the way you dress, or the beliefs that you had? Or was it just a combination of all three?
I think it always starts with the way that you look, the colour of your skin, the colour of your hair, the way that you dress. And that's not individual just to race, of course, because you might see someone who's the same colour skin but just dressing differently and they get judged. You know, you speak about brands, all the rest of it, but just reversing it back to colour, but absolutely would have been down to the colour of my skin, colour of your eyes, the way that you look, what you believe in, the way that you believe in things. And I believe ultimately it boils down to fear. And fear for me is just fear of the unknown. You know, you don't know what my religion is, where my background is. And then think about this for a second as well. Like, ask anybody here listening, or you guys here with me doing this podcast, when you went to school, what was you taught about Sikhism? Absolutely zero, right? If not, it would have been a sentence or two. And I remember the first time in our RE lesson when we were talking about Sikhi, I sat there so proud. Went off for lunch, and on my way back from lunch, I saw the picture of the guru that our teacher had put up on the whiteboard. It was taken down, put into the middle of the playground, and used as an aiming guide for people to spit on. And that's the kind of racism levels that you got over in Peterborough, right? But at the time, imagine feeling that, and there's no one around you. All those kids that were my school would play with me during PE, would have banter with me, would come to my house, I'd play with them either in the clay classroom or on the football pitch. All of them were no longer there for me. So it's nuts, right? You kind of go to school believing this one thing, and I suppose that kind of instance and event really kind of changed my mind. And the problem with that is you live with a chip on your shoulder. So you walk around with this kind of blinkers or this kind of blueprint. You're thinking, everybody's like that. Everyone's going to judge me. Everyone's racist. And that is a real bad way to be looking at life. And many people go through decades of having that kind of view, right? And that boils down into every single facet of life, whether it's a new job opportunity. Oh, I didn't get this because, you know, the guy's racist. Whether it's an opportunity out and about, you're angry. So you're more, when you're listening to things and viewing things and experiencing things in life, you don't view them with a filter of, gosh, life's so beautiful. You view it with the filter of, gosh, someone's against me. I've got a chip on my shoulder, and I'm either going to have to step up and be powerful and fight, which is not something I really want to do, or I buckle down and sit in the corner and don't say a word.
So where did you find that balance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of that comes down to kind of forgiveness, and that's what I've really learned in my later years. I say later years, I'm only just 33, 21 obviously, 33. And you learn it a lot in your later years for forgiveness. I got a lot of that through meditation and talking to God and listening to God, and whether it's God or science or whatever it is that you believe in, the kind of lesson I'm trying to give here about forgiveness can be anywhere, right? And that's, I asked a question earlier about when you was at school, what you learned about Sikhism, and it was zero. So imagine the kids I'm going to school with. In school, they got taught nothing. What were their parents taught? Forget about Sikhism. What about the rest of the world? Their parents weren't taught a lot. And if you think back to the 60s England, the 50s, the 40s, I mean, there's many movies on it, right? I can't sit here and quote every single fact, but I'm pretty sure you guys understand the perception. Nobody wanted to know. There's a massive fear of the unknown. There's so much racism. Countries were just about gaining their independence, India being one of them throughout the 1900s, right? And that kind of mistreatment of ethnics, minorities, whatever race, religion we were, existed worse back then. It was a lot more violent back then, whereas today I think it's a lot more verbal and psychological. I think
that there's still some work that needs to be done in terms of understanding many different religions. I mean, just kind of one thing, kind of like a stat to pull out from us is that like a 2022 survey, so literally last year, was done by the University of Birmingham and found out that only 27% of Britons actually knew that Sikhism was a religion of peace. and found that only 17% know that Sikhs make up less than 1% of the UK population. So you've got people here not understanding a religion, for one, and your religion is all about peace and acceptance, and yet they're thinking that, you know, there's so much kind of hate towards them, and that people are violent. Well, actually, you guys are a very small, minority in the UK. So it's
That's
really
full of peace.
Yeah. And it's just crazy that lack of education, like you said, about the schooling system is still relevant now. Well, that survey was only done last year.
Well, look, to add to that kind of stat there, 110 Sikh soldiers served, fought and died in World War I and II fighting in this country. And that's a stat not many people know, right? So when you get told to go home back to your own country, and it's like, well, hold on, my ancestors were sat here for, you feel very kind of unfair. But like I said, when I mentioned earlier about the chip on the shoulder, if I get angry about stats or want to kind of persevere and say, oh, here's how great we are and you're being against me, you simply can't live life like that, right? So that's a follow-on, that's a message, just to understand anyone who's been through this kind of situation before, has faced it, has seen it. Yeah, you got to call it out, but you got to call it out through education and through peace rather than violence or anything else.
So, but how do you learn to trust people? How do you learn to enter a relationship with open arms? Because there's so many judgmental people in the world that have made you feel small, unaccepted, and you were just talking about forgiveness, how forgiveness was pretty much everything in terms of how you grew as a person. How do you then forgive one scenario, one person or a scenario that you've been in, and then have the courage and the strength to go into the next relationship, whatever it is, with open arms?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think ultimately asking questions like why. One thing that really helped me, especially with the kids kind of at school, was understanding where they've come from and why they've been taught what they've been taught. Meaning, like I said about their parents, they didn't know anything about any kind of race or religion. So of course, I remember going to one of my friends' house after school. I've gone round to his house, he's gone to getting changed. He's like, oh, do you mind waiting outside? I was like, yeah, cool, I don't mind whatsoever. I remember him going inside and saying, oh, I've got my friend waiting outside. And I remember his dad shouting, why have you got that beep outside my house? And you think, gosh, at the time, you think, I want the hole in the ground to kind of open up a swallowing hole, right? But in the end, his dad was taught by his dad to hate and oppress and think that anybody of a different colour is foreign and less than them. That translated to his dad. So all his dad knew was what his dad had told him. But my friend, who went into that house prior to that comment being made, he was my friend no matter what my colour. So actually, people are born with no hate towards anything whatsoever, with absolute love. And the only other emotion I believe that people are born with is fear. So I think actually when they look at me and they say these certain things, it's all through fear. For me, being a man of God and how close I've got to kind of, I want to say God in the spiritual way that I have, I'd rather lead with the love. So I'd rather go through the education. And in fact, anybody kind of saying those kind of things or treating me a certain type of way, and in the end, forgiveness and then education, and then for them to come back to me and say, you know what, I'm so sorry, thank you so much for opening my eyes, is a win. Because I believe you are best placed to be the change you want to see in the world as opposed to anything else.
How do you then find the humility to forgive people that have hurt you?
In one sentence, what's the alternative? That I hold on to the pain, that I hold on to the anger and take it out on people around me? Because I fully believe if that's what you fuel your blueprint with, if that's what you want to call it, every part of life that comes out with, it comes out. So every time you're angry, it will come out with something crazy, right? Every time you have a moment of frustration, every time you feel hard done by. I believe that holding on to the anger, the pain and the chip on the shoulder that I was mentioning earlier only affects your life for the negative. And it blinkers you to see bigger and brighter opportunities. But one of the messages I want to give as well is that everything we're talking about goes both ways. So as many times as I was judged, criticised, put down because of the way that I look without people getting to know me, the same thing exists in my culture. So example, and every single culture I've seen across the planet, whether you're Sikh, Hindu, Pakistani, Jewish, Black, Jamaican, African, whatever you are, there will be some level of discriminative conversation taking place against someone who's white, for example. I've got plenty of friends from like an African or Jamaican descent that will talk about white boys. They say, oh, that's just white boy stuff, leave that alone. I've got plenty of Muslim friends that wouldn't even consider a partner unless they're the same religion. I've got Sikh families that say you cannot get married to a white person and don't ever come back with a black person. If that's not racism, then that's what it is. I suppose one of the key messages I want to give is this whole thing, it goes both ways. So for anyone out there who's been affected Always take the time to reflect on yourself and think, gosh, have I ever been involved in a conversation around my own people where we have perhaps discriminated or discounted somebody based on what their religion, faith, or colour of skin is?
From what you've just said there, to me, it seems like you have different cultures just going into like self-protection mode.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, if you don't like us, we don't like you. Mm-hmm. Now, how could you see the world and society improving in that and allowing everybody to feel more inclusive, where we all basically eat at the same table?
Yeah. I think a couple of things. Firstly, be curious. It's always good to know about not just faiths and religions, but cultures and traditions and ceremonies. It's so special to learn about everyone else's kind of bits that they get done around the world, right? And when you get to understand that, it makes you a man of the world or a woman of the world or a person of the world. It's like when you go traveling, right? People go to traveling, they come back, and their whole mentality shifts on what life's about, and they kind of educate themselves on what other cultures do, and they come back maybe a bit more open-minded, perhaps. So it's hard because there isn't one justified answer that's going to bring everyone together. And what we talk about now is always going to exist. You know, conflict and resolution. It's just the history of mankind as far back as you look. So I suppose, but the bottom line is, it will never stop. It will never kind of be a place where there's no racism or no discrimination. It will just never happen. It's just a beast. But one way that we can do it is, by all means, by through the power of love and some forgiveness. To talk to others like you'd want to be treated. Understand the why behind things, not just, these guys like to set off fireworks and light candles in Diwali, but why? What's the story behind it? It's a bit like Easter. What's the real reason behind Easter? Because ultimately they come down to faiths, and they come down to real reasons, which are symbolic to a person that kind of admires or is passionate about their religion, right? And that's a beautiful place to be when you get to educate yourself about others.
And then for you then, I guess, so in the workplace, have you experienced any kind of harassment or any kind of negative actions based on your beliefs, or has the workplace been a safe space for you?
Workplaces predominantly are always a safe space, especially here at Blue Square and most of the companies that I've worked in, to be honest. One good thing about, I suppose, this era, if you like, is you're encouraged to speak, you're encouraged to report, you've got people around you that want to hear your story, and there's far more many people fighting the battle of discrimination based on ethnicity or race than there are against it, if that makes sense. Have I faced it in the workplace? Absolutely. And I got it a lot when you kind of when you're in the field and you're visiting stores, and you might see certain people from a certain kind of location. I don't want to call any out at the moment, but I remember about good 10 years ago visiting some locations, and it could be something as simple as, we're not used to your colour around here, actually. And it's like, for me, it's not racist, but it's like, this isn't 1845 in Mississippi, America. This is England, I don't understand where that's come from, but to them, that comment's normal. It's absolutely normal. It's like, well, why can't I say, we don't often see you guys around here? It's like, well, actually, yeah, you're right. But it just depends on the intent that comes with that, right?
Yeah, is it harmful, hateful, or is it lack of education?
Absolutely. So if the following conversation is, talk to me about you, how you doing, and they're nice, and they're just genuine people that just want to get to know another human being, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But if it's like, haven't really seen many people from your kind of colour around here, what are you doing around here, and what are you here to steal, or whatever, how it happens, right? So those kind of conversations are not nice to have. But that happens in life. And like I said, I suppose that dives back into what I was kind of taught and encouraged to feel like as a kid, which is, don't worry about it, just push on. It's going to happen, son. Just be strong.
So Jazz, you mentioned previously that when you were growing up, your family were subject to quite a significant amount of hate crimes. And just kind of like looking through like some stats and stuff that we have here, it seems that Sikhs are often bullied and harassed because of their turbans and the religious symbols. Have you found that maybe you've not necessarily experienced it recently, but maybe some of your family members or friends that you've been with that are having, say, more physical displays of their religion than you do have experienced that kind of hatred?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that name calling from when I was younger in school was one of the main reasons why I didn't grow a turban. My brother, older than me, strong guy, he wore a turban or a podgar, is what it used to be called when it's kind of not quite yet a turban. And the names that he would be called were so off-putting towards me. And in fact, I remember thinking as a young adult, young teenager, gosh, I do not want to look Indian. I don't want to look Sikh. I want to look normal. I want to watch EastEnders, and I want to drink cups of teas. And I don't want to bring my culture or my individuality to this school. I want to act like the rest of my white friends do, just so I could fit in and not get that same kind of bullying. My brother, with the name calling, it kind of puts you off. And today, it happens today as well. And in particular, I bring it back to one event, was after the 9/11 attacks. And I remember the day walking into school on that morning and the segregation from people against me, and there was only me and 5 other ethnics in the whole entire high school. And out of us 5, myself and one other fellow Indian, nobody would talk to us. Nobody would come near us and say, look what you guys are at, look what you guys are up to, where's your uncle at? And small little comments like that. And at the time you think, gosh, do I laugh? Do I joke? Do I report it? Who's there to listen to me, right? Especially in that era. And you know the old saying, especially as a kid, snitches get stitches, end up in ditches, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's kind of the mentality. So who do you report it to? Who do you tell these things to? And unfortunately at that time, it was more of a case of fight or flight. And those are your 2 options.
And choosing to fight meant?
Physical. Yeah, very much so physical, whether it was gang related, whether it was groups or whether it was one-on-one, whatever that might be. I mean, there was no other resolvement, because you know what you're like when you're a kid. You think you know everything, but you don't. You're insecure as hell, just like everybody else as well. So you're happy to call out others and put others down to help your own ego. And when you combine that with the lack of education that schools give, and when you can combine that with the mentality the parents had growing up in the era that they did, gosh, that's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? The only way to resolve that is through either a physical fight or having a calm conversation like this. But like, when you're between the ages of 11 to 18, calm adult conversation like this don't come easy, right? Mm. It's always an easy one to lift your arms.
You said something really important in what you were just saying was you didn't want to grow a turban, you wanted to look normal, is what you said. Now surely for your religion that is normal.
Absolutely.
Right? So has there not been a collective movement to make sure that Sikhism is more normalized? And if so, when did you see that start, progressing, where Sikhs were more confident just to remain themselves, stay themselves, and stay authentic?
I think on a national level, when I gave you the stat about the amount of Sikh soldiers that were in the World War I and World War II serving for the UK and the United Kingdom, that's one step. In the 80s, when they legalised wearing a turban as a replacement for a motorbike helmet. In 88, when they legalised the Qurban, which is the sword, which is a part of our religious kind of 5Ks, they legalised it in the UK. So I suppose when you look at a national level, gosh, a lot's been done to include people like Sikhs. But just going back to your stat there, I think it needs to go down to a local level as well, where in schools you're taught about every single faith and every single religion, and people to understand why people think the way that they do. You can get invited to go see a church, possibly even a mosque or any kind of religious kind of place of worship, but often you don't get invited to a gurdwara, which is our kind of place of worship, like a temple, for example, just to educate people, but not at the teenage years, at a much younger age, as opposed to learning about other things in school, religion and people. Those kind of skills should be taught from a younger age. I'm no one to be kind of harping on about what I believe our kids should be educated on, but that would definitely be a fundamental part of a blueprint of any child to grow up being curious about the world, being open-minded about whatever people look like, whatever they believe in, whatever they wear, that they are humans and they're exactly the same as you.
Because it seems like from my understanding, you're basically saying that children, if they're taught enough, they can actually teach their parents and change their parents' perspective. Because a lot of what you said earlier was that even parents had no idea about different types of religion. But if you can change the way kids are taught now in schools, even if their parents don't actually take the time to understand, maybe that can have a full circle where children are more educated, and it then leads into the parents as well to help with the full round circle of more education, whether you're a child or an adult.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's probably the bigger piece, right? For a child to go home and say, "Look, mum and dad, look at all the great things I've learned about across the world," right? Rather than any. But one great thing that's happening at the moment as well, when you look at books, when you look at adverts, literature, any piece of education, you will see a massive inclusivity in regards to all faiths. I've seen books that have just Sikh people with turbans, and the guy's talking about why he's got a turban. It's aimed at kids. I think that's beautiful. That kind of thing was never available, especially in my generation and one prior, right? So that's one great step, and that's normalizing, I suppose, what a Sikh would look like. So when we talk about some of the unprovoked attacks on Sikh people just for wearing turbans, back there they didn't know why you're wearing one. They would just systematically put you in a category. You wear a turban and you're from a certain part of the world, and that world is at war with us. For some reason they'll think like that. But today it's like, well, hold on, these people are on my books, they're in the adverts, they're on billboards, they're sponsoring massive brands, sports partnerships, that kind of thing as well. It's a lot more normalising, which is why I think racism is evolved. It's definitely, I think it's better. It definitely isn't worse, right? Because think about back in the day, it was way worse, right? But so it's definitely better, and it's definitely improving, and it's those kind of small steps.
So, so obviously you've covered the fact that you feel more confident now of who you are and how Sikhism is being portrayed. However, I've got a personal question, which maybe you don't need to answer. But if you feel like it's been more normalised, you feel more confident in yourself, why do you not have a turban nowadays?
Yeah, good question. I think the closer I've got to God through my spiritual journey, the more I've come to educate myself on my own religion. Now, one thing that kind of separates true Sikhs from the rest of it is the 5Ks. And I mentioned one earlier, which is the Qurban, which is the sword, the Kesh, which is the turban, and three others as well. When you embody the true Sikh religion and you live by the values and you wear those 5Ks, you are held responsible for something, honouring what it is that you believe in and also protecting others as well. One of the main reasons for the turban and the Qurban is for identification and protection. You are truly aligned with God, meaning you are the highest form of what a Sikh peace can offer you, meaning you are held responsible for upholding those beliefs, those thoughts, that system of protecting others, whether they're Sikh or not, and upholding your own integrity at the same time. I don't believe I'm at a place in my life where I'm able to commit my entire life to my religion, is the truth. I think back in the day, but even up until 100 years ago, life was very different. Plus, I drink and I eat meat, so I suppose that's one factor to play in, right? Will I do it later on in life? You know what? I'm entitled to do so. I'm very interested in kind of committing the rest of my life to a higher cause. But that's the main reason. It's moved away from being embarrassed or not being proud of who I am to actually, here's what it actually means. I'm not that individual, so let me not try to live my life through that means, and let me just try to
I appreciate the
version of myself that I can.
Honesty, because some people will, I've seen it myself, people will throw things around and pick and choose what beliefs they want to have and how they want to portray things, but they don't live by every word, right? And I'm sure we've all experienced it, or we've seen, we've had friends that are particular religions and they will have certain views, but they won't actually live by all of the rules. Mm-hmm. So I think it comes with great honesty and great respect for your religion that you sit here and you say, these are the reasons, these are my reasons, I believe in this and I believe in this, but I can't sit here and say I'm a perfect Sikh.
Certainly.
Do you know what I mean? That takes a great amount really of powerful respect for your religion and yourself to have that.
Thank you. And that's exactly what it is, right? It's like you can't give everything full commitment, especially something as big as a religion, which is what's close to most people. Then, I can't be preaching it and be sat here talking to you about it as proud as I can. And secondly, I wouldn't be able to answer your question with integrity, right? Which is why don't you wear a turban right now? And there'll be plenty of people that are listening as well, the same thing. Many Sikhs that don't wear turbans, and they may do it for whatever reason, but that's me.
Thank you. Thank you for that honesty.
Yeah, 100%. I guess I just kind of lastly want to kind of bring around to the workplace. I know we mentioned it and you said that work has been actually really great for you in the recent years, and being an understanding workplace and a diverse workplace. I guess what insight and advice can you share for others who might be struggling with racism in the workplace but are too afraid to speak up, or those who are struggling with that forgiveness that you've managed to kind of gain over the last few years?
Well, I'll start with a quote, yeah? Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So if you genuinely want to do something about it, you have to do something about it, and that starts with talking to people. Many people don't talk because it's typically, I think they're embarrassed. They don't want to be the guy that needed the help. And although it may be a case of, gosh, I don't know, or I've got no one to talk to, it's more of a case of, I don't know who it is that I can talk to. We talk plenty about mental health, and I'll speak to someone. And we've taught everyone to speak, but we've taught no one to listen. So what happens is sometimes they fall on deaf ears, or the kind of advice or guidance that you need from individuals that are available, because that's why we have so many people in the healthcare sector, people that can look after you from a mental aspect or a physical aspect to help you get over those challenges, right? So the first thing I would say is speak to someone. You got to speak to someone. Whether it's someone random, whether it's someone you trust, whatever it might be, is just get it off your chest. It will help. Second thing is, if you was to be asked what would be the solution to fix that problem, you needed an answer. So if you have a problem, whether it's to do with being racially abused or maybe discriminated or something else, what would you want the solution to be?
In an ideal world.
Absolutely. And is that solution, oh, you know what, I really want that promotion? Well, hold on for a minute. Do you deserve the promotion? Is that what it is? Or actually, you know what, the change I want is for everyone to understand and learn about my religion. Well, can you make that happen? And almost kind of think of what is it that you really want? What's the desired end outcome? Rather than venting or rather than reporting something as a problem, because by all means it's never acceptable in any facet of the word or the world to be that way inclined, right? But speak to someone. It could be random. Sometimes random people are the easiest people to speak to, right? Because there's no judgment, there's no embarrassment. And that's one piece of advice I give to most companies. So people have mental first aiders, they have a list of people that you can talk to. But what I would say is get rid of that list and put in an email address. Put in a Teams chat. You don't know who you're talking to. You have no idea, and you can just vent. They don't know who you are. You don't know who they are. Because sometimes by talking about things to random people, you get a bit of sanity. It's almost like you get to sense check the way your brain's thinking by putting out these words into the world and bringing them back. So the first thing I say is talk to someone. Second thing I'll do is think about what the desired outcome is from what it is that you want. And the third thing is be honest as well, and just be honest with yourself. Be a bit more forgiving with yourself as well. Don't get angry. You've got to leave those emotions to one side. And really be truthful with yourself about whether you're in the right place or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Jazz, you're teaching me so much during this episode, and so I have another question, which is maybe another personal question. So please feel free not to answer it. But you so confidently and vulnerably mentioned that you're not in a position where you want to fully dedicate yourself, to be fully Sikh, wear a turban and go in that direction. Now, in your religion, is that something that is frowned upon? Like your parents, would they frown upon that or be upset about that, or is that something they would support you in?
Ultimately, they supported me. I think when you look at the migration of Sikhs into the Western world, that was one of the things that we lost the most, which was the traditional, the turban, the 5Ks that I mentioned earlier, that kind of spirituality towards God. It got lost over in the Western world because it just typically does, right? Look how crazy some parts of the world are. So they were very accommodating and very understanding about why I was doing what I was doing. And ultimately, when I got later on down the line, when I looked at my religion and I studied it, I realized why is that we do what we do. And it goes back to my answer earlier about why I don't wear a turban. It's because I'm simply not there yet. So well and truly, I wasn't equipped, nor do I deserve it, perhaps, if you like. It's an honor in my eyes to be a fully pledged Sikh with all 5Ks and represent your religion so profoundly and proudly. I think that's an honor. And I'm not quite ready there. So my family were really understanding about it. My mum's uber religious. My father, my late father, who's no longer here, he wasn't massively religious. So I suppose between the two, there's a lot of understanding, right? And especially with my generation of men in particular, most of them got rid of their turbans. Most of us have trimmed down beards, and it's just the way it is, I suppose.
I'm going to ask another question after that, because you said it's like really, really important that you said that you almost didn't feel like you were deserving of it. Now, my question to you would be, what makes you feel that way?
I think growing up as a kid, trying to bend the rules of the culture. I don't want to use the word rules. I just want to say the word what's written, right? Try to change that to become more white and more English. I was one of 5 ethnics in the school full of 1,000. You want to change the way you look, the way you come across, the way that you talk. And it's almost like, gosh, I feel ashamed of myself. I've discounted that I did that. Yeah, I've discounted my religion, my faith, all the things that are really, really important to me. But as a kid, what do you know, right? You just survival, with it, fight or flight, like I mentioned earlier. So what do? So I suppose in that way, maybe half of it is to do with, gosh, you compromise your own values there, Jazz, based on how other people made you feel. But as you get later on in life and you become to study your faith and your religion and other religions, of course, because that's just as important, you realise that, God, in order to be a full-pledged Sikh like I should be, there's a lot more that I've got to commit and sacrifice, actually. Yeah.
I guess also working on yourself, right? If you know deep down that I'm not ready for this, but you force yourself to do it, would that then bring you shame if you slipped back into your old ways because you knew that you were not ready?
Yeah, absolutely. And the analogy I can give is it's like a prime minister. If you are a prime minister and you get voted, your job is to serve the people. If you're dodging tax or doing something untoward, unethical, gosh, you do not deserve to be in that position. It's the same as a Sikh. If I came here sat with the 5Ks fully pledged like a true Sikh should be, but I'm out there drinking or eating meat or even discriminating, thinking wrong about anybody, even the thoughts that you have, let alone what you do physically, that unwarrants me as a Sikh. So for someone who to look at me and be like, oh, is that what a Sikh is? But hold on, he's drinking and he's doing this. What would you think about Sikhism as a religion? You think, oh, it's just an easy compromise, you're all good to go, right? That's just the way I believe, just because the way I've been brought up. And my mentality isn't the same or is shared amongst the whole world, but that's just what I believe.
I respect the honesty, and Jazz, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us. I know, Nick, I think both of us are walking away from this with a lot more understanding and a lot of, I feel a bit like pained by some of the things that you've gone through. And I didn't go through them, but just understanding more about how you've been treated and the person that you are now and how resilient you are as an individual and what you've managed to achieve, even though you've been through something that's incredibly traumatic.
I think it's growth I've seen from you today is how much growing you've done, how much soul searching you've also had to go through. I think forgiveness is the biggest part. Is I've been treated like this or like that, but you found it in yourself to forgive, to then continue to grow. And I think that's something that's really struck a chord with me today. So thank you for being so open and honest.
Thank you for saying that, and honestly, thank you for the opportunity for me to kind of come here and talk. I think the last thing I'd like to say is, a wise man once said to me, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, I don't know what they were, I don't know who quoted it either, but a wise man once said to me, if you and everyone else you knew put all of your problems in a pot, you'd only want your own problems back. And I truly believe in that. And through that kind of teaching, whether it's life loss, close family loss, turmoil, anything that's going on in your life, it makes you realise that, gosh, other people have got problems too. And like I said, you probably want your own problems back because they're your problems, right? Learn to deal with it. Some people don't get to wake up this morning. I'm sure by the time this podcast airs, there's probably another war or another set of children that have been killed by some untoward actions or some terrible kind of set of circumstances, right? Because you could be that person. You could be anyone in the world. How privileged we are to be born in a country like this, which is way ahead of the curve when it comes to human rights in particular, right? We should be privileged. We should be very privileged. And without getting too political or anything like that whatsoever, I challenge everybody, everyone listening, viewing, taking part, is to really look at your own life. Think, gosh, let me look at someone else's problems, look at my problems, are they really problems, and put it into a pot. And just make a clear, conscious decision to think, gosh, I've got two ways that I can see this. I call it the poor little old me attitude, which is poor old me, I've got all the problems in the world. Or, you know what, I've got these problems, but I'd rather these problems than anything else. Builds resilience, gives you strength, and gives you that mentality to push on. And I believe that kind of skill set that I've learned to develop is fed through into all parts of my life, whether that's in the gym and eating, whether that's with my relationship, my family, with my partner, whether it's kind of moving on in my career, wherever that might be. That set of skills got me way further than I'm angry at life. I'm angry with God, I'm angry with people, I deserve this, and me. And it got me way further. So thank you for letting me send that message.
Thank you very much, Jazz. And for our listeners out there, if you want to find out some more about Samaritans, they are people there to listen. Both myself and Nick have used the Samaritans before. We've also got another resource called ACAS for you to find out some more, and some UK-specific sources of information on challenges that have been faced by Sikhs as well. The Sikh Council UK, the University of Birmingham, and the Runnymede Trust all have incredible resources to find out more about this religion. Thank you everybody for joining us on the latest episode of INclusiverse, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you.